Japan is planning to have its most consequential election in years. The 2026 lower house election will determine whether Japan returns to single-party dominance or whether it could truly shift towards a healthier multi-party democracy, a shift that began in July 2025. What makes this election even more unusual is its timing. The Prime Minister has called a snap election in January, which hasn't happened for the past 36 years. As a result, Parliament won't be able to finalize the national budget before the fiscal year ends in March. And unlike last year's upper house vote in July, this election directly determines who controls government. So in this video, we'll look at why Prime Minister Takaichi called for this election, the opposition party's most dramatic realignment in decades, and what this election could mean for Japanese politics in 2026. On January 19, Prime Minister Takaichi announced that she would dissolve parliament and call for a snap election. In parliamentary systems like Japan's, the Prime Minister has the authority to dissolve the lower house at any time. Doing so immediately triggers a national election and resets Parliament's 4-year term. In other words, this election wasn't forced by legislation, but merely a political choice. According to the Prime Minister, this snap election is meant to give voters a verdict on whether she could continue leading the country. Since taking office, the Liberal Democratic Party has formed a new coalition with the Japan Innovation Party, and the Prime Minister has also been pushing an expansionary fiscal agenda through several major pieces of legislation. Calling an election now allows her to seek public approval for that direction. But while snap elections are not unusual in Japan, the timing of this one is. Calling an election in January is extremely rare. The last time a lower house election was held this early in the year was 36 years ago. As a result, Parliament will not be able to formally pass the national budget before the end of the fiscal year in March, which has a significant political and economic cost. Most analysts expected a lower house election at some point in 2026, but many assumed it would happen in March, after the budget passed, or in June, once the parliamentary session ended. The January timing caught many off guard. One reason is political momentum. Prime Minister Takaichi's personal approval ratings are exceptionally high, ranging from the high 60s to around 70%. Meanwhile, the ruling coalition currently holds only a narrow majority in the lower house. By calling an election now, Takaichi is attempting to lock in her popularity and, if successful, secure a stable mandate that could last until 2030. Another factor is the opposition. Prior to the snap election announcement, there were already rumors that the Constitutional Democratic Party in the Komeito, the LDP's former coalition partner of more than 2 decades, were exploring cooperation. Calling an early election may have been an attempt to preempt that coordination before it fully materialized. And finally, there is changing international affairs. Developments such as President Trump's military actions abroad have raised concerns about global instability. An early election will allow Prime Minister Takaichi to consolidate domestic authority ahead of meeting President Trump in March 2026. And to almost everyone's surprise, this sudden snap election triggered the largest opposition realignment Japan has seen since the 1990s. On January 16, 2026, the Constitutional Democratic Party and the Komeito announced the creation of a new political party, the Chudo Kaikaku Rengo, or the Centrist Reform Alliance. Policy-wise, the CRA represents a major shift. Economically, it leans center-left, while on foreign and security policy, it leans center-right. This marks a departure from the CDP's previous stance. The party once argued that the 2015 security legislation allowing collective self-defense was unconstitutional. Now, it accepts that framework. The CRA has also agreed to restart nuclear power plants, which is another major shift. As the name suggests, the CRA aims to promote centrist policies under the slogan Seikasha Fasto, or human well-being first. Structurally, the CDP and Komeito lawmakers in the lower house will merge into a single bloc, while the upper house members remain in their original parties. Despite concerns about internal division due to policy shifts, 144 out of 148 CDP lawmakers joined the new alliance. To understand why this realignment matters, it helps to briefly explain how Japan's lower house elections work. Japan's lower house consists of 289 single-member districts, where only one candidate can win, and 176 proportional representation seats, where voters choose a party. Each voter casts 2 votes, one local and one proportional, meaning parties must compete both locally and nationally. This system creates two major complications in the 2026 election. When Sanae Takaichi became LDP president in October 2025, Komeito ended its 2-decade-long coalition with the ruling party. Now, as part of the CRA, Komeito brings with it the support of Soka Gakkai. According to Nikkei estimates, this can mean anywhere from 9,000 to 25,000 votes per district, which is enough to swing close races. Under the new arrangement, Komeito will not field candidates in single-member districts, allowing former CDP candidates to run unopposed by allies. In return, former Komeito members would be placed at the top of the proportional representation lists. Asahi Shimbun reported that if the CRA has existed in the previous election, it could have been the largest party in parliament. However, this outcome is not guaranteed. Given the long-standing cooperative relationship between the LDP and the Komeito, it is unlikely that all Komeito supporters will shift their votes to the CRA. As a result, CRA candidates cannot assume full vote transfers. Despite forming a coalition with the JIP, the LDP and the JIP will still compete against each other in some districts. On top of that, Sanseito plans to run around 170 candidates in single-member districts. This could split the conservative vote and give the opposition an opening. The central question is whether Takaichi's popularity can translate into votes for the LDP itself. Public opinion reflects uncertainty rather than momentum. While Takaichi's approval ratings remain high, the LDP's party approval is stuck in the low 30s, which is slightly below where it stood before losing its majority in 2024. While some polls suggest that many voters are not particularly concerned about politicians involved in slush fund scandals, the LDP's decision to endorse those candidates in this election could still work against the party. According to Asahi Shimbun, only 36% support holding a snap election, while 50% oppose it. This might affect Prime Minister Takaichi's approval rating, as Mainichi reported on January 25th that her approval rating was now at 57%. When asked about the CRA, 66% said they had low expectations, and 69% said it would not effectively challenge the LDP, pointing to a perceived lack of overall vision. With roughly 30 to 40% of voters remain undecided across polls, this election remains unpredictable. All this uncertainty is unfolding alongside a broader ideological shift. The ideological landscape of Japanese politics has shifted to the right. The LDP has returned to more conservative roots. Sanseito is gaining momentum. Center-right parties like the DPFP and the JIP have gained visibility, and even the CRA has moved rightward on security and energy policy. This matters because the CDP has effectively abandoned the left-leaning camp, redefining itself as a centrist force. While left-wing parties were never large to begin with, this shift raises questions about their future influence and voter realignment. As a result, the 2026 election is likely to revolve around three major debates: immigration-related policy, national security, and the economy. On immigration, the rise of Sanseito reflects growing public attention. The government has already tightened pathways to permanent residency and citizenship, making this a more salient issue than in past elections. On security, Prime Minister Takaichi has pushed for stronger defense capabilities. With former CDP members now accepting collective self-defense as constitutional, debates over revising Article 9 or passing new security legislation may follow. The economy, however, remains a central issue, specifically consumption taxes. Every major party except Team Mirai supports some form of consumption tax reduction. The LDP-JIP coalition proposes suspending consumption taxes on food for 2 years, while parties like the Reiwa Shinsengumi and Sanseito argue for full abolition. Despite this broad consensus, Parliament was dissolved ahead of the regular schedule. From a political perspective, this allows the LDP to attempt to secure a majority in Parliament. For voters, however, it postpones concrete policy action that could ease household costs. While each party insists that tax cuts are affordable, the rhetoric has become increasingly populist. A Nikkei survey conducted between January 23 and 25 shows that 56% of respondents believe cutting consumption taxes alone will not meaningfully address inflation. In response to critics, Prime Minister Takaichi argues that suspending consumption taxes could be funded by reviewing subsidies. So check out this video to learn more about the Japanese Doge. Like the video if you learned something new, and subscribe to learn more about Japanese politics.